It all started with a whisper that rippled through the royal corridors, through social media feeds, through every fan page dedicated to Meghan Markle. What if the pregnancy that had captured the world's imagination, the pregnancy that had been celebrated in tabloids, live-streamed by paparazzi, dissected in every talk show, was never real? That's right. Millions believed they were witnessing history, a new chapter in the life of the Duchess of Sussex, only to have that belief quietly, almost shockingly, called into question by someone closest to her, someone many considered a loyal confidant. Meghan Markle's best friend, Kelly McKee, had finally spoken, and the confession was nothing short of seismic. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the very first announcement that Meghan was expecting, the world had been captivated. News outlets splashed her image across front pages, Twitter exploded with reactions, and Instagram stories buzzed with speculations. Fans and critics alike scrutinized every detail: the supposed baby bump, the carefully curated maternity outfits, the public appearances timed to perfection. Some admired the grace with which Meghan handled the relentless attention. Others doubted, questioning inconsistencies in timing, oddities in photographs, or unexplained gaps in her public presence. But the vast majority chose to believe. After all, why would anyone lie about something so intimate, so life-changing? Enter Kelly McKee. Her name was whispered behind closed doors, in online forums, and in fleeting mentions by tabloids that never dared go deeper. A friend, a confidant, a witness to private moments that no one else could see. Her relationship with Meghan was portrayed as tight-knit, almost inseparable. They dined together, celebrated birthdays, shared personal stories, and supposedly navigated the dizzying highs and crushing lows of royal life side by side. Kelly was the kind of friend everyone dreams of having, the one who sees everything, the one who knows the truths no one else does. And yet, when she decided to speak, the revelation she brought to light threatened to unravel everything the public had believed about Meghan Markle. Imagine the scene: millions of viewers leaning in, eyes glued to a screen, hearts pounding in anticipation. Kelly, poised yet hesitant, begins recounting what she witnessed, what she knew, and what she could no longer keep hidden. Her words are measured, precise, but they land like thunder. She claims that Meghan Markle's celebrated pregnancy, the one the tabloids had broadcasted to the world, was not real. That the Duchess, for reasons that would soon become apparent, had staged the entire event. For some, this is impossible to grasp. For others, the confession confirms long-held suspicions. But the shock does not stop at the claim itself. The timing of Kelly's revelation, coming now, after years of public adoration and scrutiny, adds another layer of intensity. Why wait? Why reveal such a bombshell after so much time has passed? And perhaps most importantly, how much of what the public believed was a carefully constructed illusion, designed to manipulate perception and control narrative? Before diving into the details, it's crucial to understand the context. Meghan Markle's life, especially since joining the royal family, has been a constant whirlwind of attention, both loving and critical. Every move was documented, every smile analyzed, every appearance scrutinized. Pregnancy, in that world, is never just a private moment. It becomes a public event, a spectacle, a symbol. When Meghan announced she was expecting, she stepped into an arena where rumors were currency and appearances were everything. A staged pregnancy, if true, would not just be a personal deception, it would be a public strategy. Kelly's confession comes with layers. She doesn't just state that the pregnancy was fake. She provides context, anecdotes, and insights that make the claim almost tangible. She recalls moments when Meghan's behavior seemed inconsistent with what one would expect from a pregnant woman. She notes instances where schedules, interviews, and public appearances aligned too perfectly, almost mechanically, as if curated for maximum impact. She shares private conversations where Meghan allegedly hinted at orchestrating narratives for the media, controlling perception in ways that left Kelly both astonished and conflicted. The implications are profound. If Meghan Markle's pregnancy was indeed fabricated, it casts a shadow over her entire public persona, her carefully crafted image as a relatable, authentic figure in the royal family. It calls into question media coverage, fan reactions, and the narrative spun by insiders and commentators alike. It forces us to re-examine every photograph, every interview, every public appearance through a lens of skepticism. And it raises a pressing question: what else might have been staged, controlled, or manipulated for public consumption? Even more astonishing is the emotional dimension. Kelly McKee-Zadfan's confession is not delivered with malice or vengeance. It is shared with a sense of duty, a need to speak the truth, even if it shatters public perception. She struggles with loyalty and honesty, revealing the internal conflict she faced as someone deeply embedded in Meghan's world. Her words resonate because they come from someone who was there, someone who observed the reality behind the public spectacle. And that authenticity is what makes her claims so shocking. As the world grapples with the revelation, fans are left reeling. Social media ignites with debate. Some accuse Kelly of betrayal. Others praise her courage. A faction of Meghan supporters refuses to believe, insisting that any claim of a fake pregnancy is impossible, implausible, even cruel. Meanwhile, skeptics find validation in the confession, pointing to inconsistencies long dismissed or overlooked. The dialogue is heated, emotional, and unrelenting. But what makes this story even more compelling is timing. Recent events have brought Meghan Markle back into the public eye. Interviews, media coverage, charity work, and royal commentary. The juxtaposition of Kelly's confession against this renewed visibility amplifies its impact. It's not just a story about the past. It is a revelation that intersects with the present, altering how audiences perceive ongoing events. The timing ensures that the narrative does not remain abstract or historical. It becomes immediate, urgent, and emotionally charged. Moreover, Kelly's account is detailed. She provides a timeline of events, recalls specific interactions, and recounts private observations that, when combined, paint a picture that is difficult to ignore. She explains how the public-facing moments, the photo shoots, the carefully timed announcements, the staged appearances, contrasted sharply with what happened behind closed doors. Her insights make it almost impossible for the audience to dismiss the possibility that the pregnancy, as widely believed, might not have occurred at all. And yet, even as Kelly reveals these shocking details, questions abound. How did the media miss it? Were royal insiders complicit, or were they simply deceived as well? What motivated Meghan to fabricate such a story, if indeed it was fabricated? And what does this mean for her relationship with the public, with her family, and with those closest to her? The layers of intrigue deepen with each revelation, creating a narrative that is as emotionally gripping as it is controversial. As we prepare to delve deeper, it's essential to frame the conversation not merely as gossip, but as a dramatic exposé with real stakes. This is a story about power, perception, loyalty, and truth. It's a story about the tension between private reality and public image. And it's a story that challenges everything we think we know about Meghan Markle, her inner circle, and the carefully curated world she inhabits. So stay with us, because what comes next will take you inside the private world of Meghan Markle and Kelly McKee-Zadfan like never before. We'll explore the details of the alleged fake pregnancy, the moments that seemed suspicious in hindsight, and the reactions that shook the world. Each revelation will pull back another layer, revealing a story that is as complex as it is shocking. And just when you think you understand the scope of what Kelly has revealed, there's more, much more. Because what came next, after the whispers, after the hints, after the carefully guarded secrets, would change everything. It would make the world question everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle, the media, and the reality of royal life itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the world was watching a story that never really happened? That's the question no one asked at the time. The cameras flashed, the microphones hung eagerly toward Meghan Markle, and millions of eyes followed her every move, assuming they were witnessing a miracle, a real pregnancy, a genuine milestone in royal history. But what if all of it was an elaborate performance? The media frenzy surrounding Meghan's pregnancies was unlike anything seen before. From the moment she announced her first pregnancy, tabloids, news outlets, and social media platforms went into overdrive. Photographers camped outside royal residences. Journalists dissected every outfit, every expression, every smile. News anchors spoke as if they were narrating a global event rather than a private personal journey. And the fans? They ate it up. Every announcement, every Instagram post, every carefully staged photo op was consumed and analyzed with obsessive intensity. Consider the first appearances. Meghan's so-called baby bump became the subject of endless speculation. Was it real? Was it padded? Was it strategically positioned for the cameras? Fashion experts offered their opinions, body language analysts weighed in, and fans in online forums debated tirelessly over screenshots and paparazzi snapshots. Some praised her elegance and composure. Others were suspicious, noting inconsistencies, the subtle shift in how she held herself, the timing of public outings, the angles of photos that always seemed just right. But the majority chose to believe. After all, in a world obsessed with appearances, why would anyone doubt the most famous woman on the planet? And then there was the timing. The announcements were perfectly choreographed. The media knew in advance, weeks sometimes, when Meghan would appear publicly. Each image released, each official statement, was timed to ensure maximum coverage and public excitement. The first pregnancy announcement hit social media like a tidal wave. News channels interrupted regular programming. Magazines printed special editions, and fan pages exploded with posts. The public drank it all in, often blindly, not realizing how carefully curated each moment had been. But while the world celebrated, Kelly McKee-Zajfin was watching closely. She observed the small details that no one else could see. The moments when Meghan seemed unusually tired yet insisted on attending multiple public engagements. The slight discrepancies between what was happening in private and what the cameras captured. The hidden pauses, the subtle adjustments, the tiny moments of hesitation when Meghan believed no one was looking. These were not things the public could notice, and yet, in hindsight, they would later become critical pieces of the puzzle that Kelly would lay bare. It wasn't just about photographs or interviews. It was about timing, appearances, and control. Meghan had stepped into a world where image was everything, and pregnancy, a private, intimate experience, had become a public spectacle. Every press release, every carefully chosen outfit, every staged outing contributed to a narrative meticulously designed to shape perception. For the average fan, it was mesmerizing. For someone like Kelly, it was often unnerving. She knew what the cameras didn't see. She knew what was real, and she began to notice the small inconsistencies that later fueled her decision to speak out. Social media, of course, added another layer of intensity. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram became echo chambers, amplifying both praise and suspicion. Every image of Meghan's supposed pregnancy was scrutinized, every public appearance dissected frame by frame. Hashtags trended overnight. Fans created elaborate theories. Some celebrated Meghan as the epitome of grace and modern royalty. Others whispered quietly, questioning whether the image presented to the world matched the reality behind closed doors. And then there were the talk shows. Morning programs and late-night hosts alike capitalized on the frenzy. Fashion analysts dissected dresses, body language experts debated posture, and commentators speculated about the implications for the monarchy. Every public appearance was interpreted as a statement. Every missed event became fodder for speculation. And the audience? Hooked, engaged, hungry for more. Yet amidst all the spectacle, there were moments that seemed off. Photographs taken at certain events appeared slightly staged, angles carefully chosen to create the perfect silhouette. Meghan's body language, at times, suggested fatigue that didn't align with the appearances she was making. Interviews were delivered with polished charm, but sometimes her responses seemed rehearsed, measured, almost too perfect. To the casual observer, these were minor details. To Kelly, they were signs that would later become central to her explosive confession. The public, of course, had no access to the private reality. They didn't see the exhausted phone calls late at night, the moments of private doubt, the carefully crafted wardrobe adjustments meant to maintain the illusion. They didn't know about the precise choreography of each media appearance, the subtle nudges and reminders from advisors, or the calculated control over every image and word. All they saw was the finished product, Meghan, glowing, graceful, pregnant, the perfect story unfolding on the world stage. And then there's the emotional angle. Millions of fans felt joy, empathy, even love. Many followed Meghan's journey with intense personal investment. She represented modernity, grace, and hope. Her pregnancies were seen as milestones for women in the public eye, as symbols of empowerment and personal achievement. And yet, the thought that this narrative could have been fabricated shook the very foundation of that admiration. For some, the confession would feel like betrayal. For others, it would validate suspicions they had long been too afraid to voice. Kelly McKee-Zadfan's observations didn't stop at the obvious. She saw how Meghan navigated the fine line between public expectation and private reality. She noticed the strategic smiles, the rehearsed hand gestures, the timed pauses for cameras. She watched the subtle ways Meghan controlled perception, ensuring that the public saw exactly what was intended. And while this may have seemed harmless or even clever in the moment, in hindsight, it painted a picture that was both fascinating and alarming. Imagine living through that. To witness the world believing something so utterly convincing, while knowing, at least in part, the truth that nobody else could see. That tension, the cognitive dissonance between private observation and public spectacle, would later drive Kelly to reveal her account. And it's this tension, this mix of loyalty, awe, confusion, and shock, that makes her confession so compelling. Because she isn't speaking as a critic or a reporter. She is speaking as someone who was there, someone who lived alongside the story, someone who understood the machinery behind the public image. The stakes were high. The media frenzy wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the monarchy, about public perception, about control. Every revelation, every rumor, had the potential to ripple across social media, television networks, and royal observers worldwide. And yet, in the middle of all this chaos, Kelly saw moments that made her question everything. Tiny inconsistencies, subtle behaviors, and private admissions hinted at a truth that was far removed from the narrative being presented to the world. As the media continued its relentless coverage, Kelly's perspective remained largely private, confined to whispered conversations and private messages. But the world never truly paused. Headlines screamed. Twitter feeds erupted. Fan forums buzzed with excitement, speculation, and theories. Each new image, each new statement, was analyzed for hidden meaning. And throughout all of it, Kelly observed silently, knowing what few others could. But what no one realized, not the media, not the fans, not even Meghan herself, was that these observations would eventually culminate in a confession that would shock the world. What seemed like isolated moments of curiosity and analysis were actually pieces of a puzzle that, when completed, would tell a story far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. And then the moment arrived. The tipping point. The point where Kelly could no longer stay silent. The world had celebrated, theorized, and obsessed over Meghan's supposed pregnancy. But Kelly had decided that the truth needed to be told, that the facade needed to be peeled back. And the confession she delivered would ripple across media outlets, fan forums, and royal commentary alike. Because in that confession, the world learned something it never expected. What millions believed to be real, what had been broadcast, celebrated, and scrutinized, was perhaps an illusion. A carefully constructed narrative. A story with layers that went far beyond what any headline had ever suggested. And just as the world tried to process that, another twist awaited. A detail so shocking that it would make even the most devoted fans pause and question everything. What does it really mean to be a best friend to someone like Meghan Markle? Is it loyalty, trust, shared secrets, or something far more complicated? For Kelly McKee-Zadfan, the answer would prove to be all of these and more. She wasn't just a casual acquaintance or a social media tag. She was in the inner circle, the kind of friend who sees the private moments that the public never does. And when she spoke, the world realized just how much she had witnessed and how much she had kept to herself until now. From the outside, Meghan's life seemed perfect, elegant, poised, photographed in glamorous settings. Headlines screamed about the modern royal and her compassionate initiatives, her style choices, her grace under the relentless media microscope. But for someone like Kelly, who spent hours alongside Meghan in private, the picture was far more complex. Behind the polished smiles and camera-ready appearances were moments of tension, pressure, and subtle manipulation. Kelly's relationship with Meghan wasn't born overnight. It was forged over shared experiences, quiet conversations, and moments of trust that no one else could witness. She saw Meghan in a way the public never could. In the early days, it was all charm, laughter, and shared confidences. They discussed personal goals, career ambitions, and the looming shadow of royal scrutiny. Kelly became the sounding board, the advisor, and the friend who could provide honest feedback without fear of repercussion. But intimacy has its price. Being in Meghan's inner circle meant witnessing contradictions between her public image and private reality. It meant seeing the carefully constructed persona and understanding the machinery behind it. There were moments of vulnerability, certainly, but there were also moments when Meghan's awareness of public perception seemed to overshadow genuine emotion. And Kelly noticed. Every slight hesitation, every calculated pause, every perfectly timed smile contributed to a picture that was increasingly complex and increasingly suspicious. So when Meghan's pregnancy announcements came, Kelly was watching more than the world. She observed the orchestration, the way timing, media coverage, and public appearances aligned almost too perfectly. She noticed subtle inconsistencies, interactions that didn't seem natural, schedules that left no room for genuine fatigue, and appearances where the so-called baby bump seemed convenient. At first, she questioned herself. Was she imagining things? Was the intensity of public scrutiny causing her to misread normal stress and behavior? But over time, the inconsistencies added up, forming a pattern that she could no longer ignore. Kelly's insight wasn't just observational, it was emotional. She had moments where she felt conflicted, torn between loyalty to Meghan and the mounting awareness that something was off. She understood the stakes. Speaking out could shatter a friendship, invite public backlash, and thrust her into a media maelstrom. Remaining silent, however, meant living with knowledge that contradicted the global narrative. It was a tension that would eventually become unbearable. And then there were the moments of private revelation. Over time, Meghan shared insights and personal reflections that seemed minor at the moment, but, in hindsight, were incredibly revealing. She would hint at strategic thinking around public perception, discuss carefully crafted media narratives, and occasionally, in passing, comment on controlling what the world saw. To a casual observer, these remarks might have seemed like idle conversation. To Kelly, they were pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, painted a picture that challenged everything she had believed about authenticity, image, and truth. This is where the complexity of friendship comes into play. Can a friend maintain loyalty when the truth is so shocking? Can one balance compassion for someone they care about with the responsibility to reveal information that could be vital to the public understanding? Kelly wrestled with these questions. Every anecdote she shared, every observation she recorded internally, contributed to the weight she carried. And the longer she held the truth, the more difficult it became to remain silent. To understand why Kelly's confession carries such weight, it's necessary to appreciate the access she had. Unlike journalists or distant observers, she was there during private dinners, casual conversations, and intimate discussions about plans, intentions, and personal struggles. She witnessed the subtle ways Meghan navigated public scrutiny, controlled narratives, and managed appearances. She saw the tension between reality and performance, between private truth and public image. And when she ultimately spoke, it was not a detached report. It was an insider account, a chronicle of moments that no outsider could have pieced together without that level of proximity. But the most striking aspect of Kelly's relationship with Meghan was trust. Being a confidant meant that Meghan assumed Kelly would protect her secrets, would interpret actions with understanding, and would not expose vulnerabilities to the world. Kelly, for a long time, honored that trust. She held the contradictions, the inconsistencies, and the subtle manipulations close, buried beneath layers of loyalty. It was only after years of reflection, and perhaps after realizing the magnitude of what the public would never know otherwise, that she decided to come forward. And what she revealed is nothing short of extraordinary. Kelly claimed that Meghan's pregnancy, the one that had been celebrated, speculated about, and scrutinized, was not genuine. It was staged. This is not the casual rumor-mongering of tabloids or social media chatter. This is a confession from someone who had been present, who had access to intimate moments, and who understood the nuances that the public never could. The implications are staggering. Think about it. Millions of fans celebrated life events that may have been fabricated. Media outlets reported news that may have been engineered. Every photograph, every public appearance, every headline that chronicled Meghan's pregnancy may have been part of a carefully orchestrated narrative. And while speculation had existed in the background for years, Kelly's account provided an insider validation that no casual observer could offer. Yet, even within the confession, Kelly maintains nuance. She does not frame Meghan as malicious or deceptive for the sake of cruelty. Rather, she presents a complex picture of someone navigating unprecedented scrutiny, managing personal stakes, and orchestrating appearances to maintain control. In other words, this is a story not just about truth and lies, but about perception, strategy, and the extraordinary pressures of living under the relentless gaze of the world. Kelly's confession raises profound questions. How do we, as an audience, interpret the line between public image and private reality? What responsibilities do friends, confidants, and insiders hold when they witness discrepancies between what the world sees and what truly occurs? And perhaps most importantly, how much of what we consume as truth in the media is curated, managed, and sometimes fabricated to maintain a narrative? And the timing of her confession adds another layer. Coming years after the supposed pregnancy events, the revelation arrives at a moment when Meghan remains a global figure under intense scrutiny. Public interest is renewed, social media is already primed for reaction, and journalists are eager for insider information. Kelly's account does not just reveal a past event. It reshapes how ongoing narratives about Meghan Markle are interpreted. It forces both fans and skeptics to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Perhaps the most compelling part of Kelly's confession is the tension between loyalty and revelation. She speaks from a place of intimacy and authority, and yet every word carries risk. To speak publicly about a private moment, especially one tied to something as emotionally charged as pregnancy, is to challenge both the individual and the collective perception. Kelly chose truth over silence, knowing the impact her words would have on global audiences, the media, and the royal family itself. And as the world reacts, fans shocked, media buzzing, royal commentators analyzing every angle, the question becomes, what will Meghan do next? How will the palace respond, if at all? How will public perception shift in light of this confession? And perhaps most tantalizingly, what other secrets, observations, or private truths remain undisclosed, waiting for someone brave enough to reveal them? Kelly's role as Meghan's inner circle member is critical to understanding the gravity of her words. She doesn't speak from hearsay, conjecture, or speculation. She speaks from experience, observation, and intimacy. And that authenticity is what gives her confession the power to shake the very foundations of how the world has perceived Meghan Markle. But what came next, the next revelation, the moment that truly forced the public to question everything, was even more shocking than the initial claim. Because while millions were stunned by the suggestion of a fake pregnancy, few were prepared for the details, the anecdotes, and the private insights Kelly would reveal next. Have you ever felt a whisper of doubt that something everyone believes might not be true? That uneasy, nagging feeling that maybe the story isn't quite what it seems? For years, whispers about Meghan Markle's pregnancies lingered in the background, quiet enough to be dismissed by most, yet persistent enough to make some pause. Kelly McKee-Zajfin had noticed them long before the world ever did, and the details she later shared would make those whispers impossible to ignore. The rumors didn't begin with a public confession. They started subtly, in ways the media and fans were quick to overlook. A slightly off photograph here, a gap between appearances there, a wardrobe choice that didn't quite fit the timeline of a typical pregnancy. For most, these were minor anomalies, easily explained by the logistics of royal life or the chaos of public schedules. But for someone embedded in Meghan's inner circle, someone attuned to the rhythm of private versus public behavior, the inconsistencies were impossible to ignore. Kelly recalls the first moments that made her question the narrative. It wasn't a dramatic reveal or a glaring mistake. It was the small things, the way Meghan carried herself during supposed third trimester events, the meticulous timing of appearances that always seemed perfectly synchronized, the subtle way certain interactions with the press were managed. Each detail, on its own, could be dismissed, but taken together, they painted a picture that didn't align with the story being told to the world. Social media played a strange role in this phenomenon. Platforms that allow for instant reaction and viral sharing amplified even the smallest anomalies. Fans posted side-by-side comparisons of photographs, scrutinized angles, and analyzed lighting for signs that the pregnancy might not be authentic. A dress appeared slightly different in one image than another. A handshake or a gesture seemed rehearsed rather than natural. To the casual viewer, these were trivial inconsistencies. To Kelly, they were subtle signals, a breadcrumb trail pointing toward a larger truth. Rumors are one thing. Confirmation is another. Kelly's position as Meghan's confidant gave her access to private conversations and behind-the-scenes moments that no one else could verify. She observed the orchestration firsthand, the meticulous planning of appearances, the deliberate staging for photographers, and the careful management of narrative across different media outlets. Every announcement, every public outing, seemed calculated not just for optics, but to construct a consistent storyline, one that would be difficult for outsiders to question. But the rumors weren't just about timing or photos. They touched on emotional contradictions as well. People noticed subtle cues in Meghan's behavior, hesitation in interviews, a practiced composure, the occasional misalignment between words and expression. Fans speculated online. Commenters questioned whether fatigue or stress might explain these minor inconsistencies. Analysts debated whether pregnancy itself could account for certain gestures or choices. But those in Meghan's inner circle, like Kelly, understood that these cues were often carefully managed. They were performances, subtle yet deliberate, designed to maintain the illusion. It wasn't just the public appearances that raised questions. There were events behind closed doors that seemed to contradict what was shown to the world. Kelly observed moments when Meghan appeared lighter, less encumbered, in ways inconsistent with late-stage pregnancy. There were meals, activities, and interactions that didn't align with expectations for someone in her supposed condition. To an outsider, these might have seemed normal. To Kelly, they were pieces of a puzzle, pieces she would later use to substantiate her shocking confession. The rumors began to take on a life of their own once subtle inconsistencies were noticed in public forums. Bloggers, fan sites, and online communities started piecing together timelines and photographs, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes deliberately. They debated what they saw, questioned official narratives, and slowly created a parallel narrative outside mainstream media. This digital undercurrent would eventually become a crucial backdrop for Kelly's confession, providing a framework in which the revelation of a potentially staged pregnancy could resonate so profoundly. And yet, despite all the speculation, most of the public remained fully invested in the story. People wanted to believe. They wanted to celebrate a joyful milestone, to admire a modern royal figure navigating public life with elegance and grace. The idea that the pregnancy could have been fabricated was almost unthinkable. How could a life event so deeply personal, so emotionally charged, be faked, orchestrated, and broadcasted to the world? The very thought sparked a mix of disbelief and intrigue, two emotions that would fuel the dramatic tension of Kelly's revelation. In addition to visual inconsistencies and behavioral cues, Kelly also observed communication patterns that hinted at manipulation of perception. Emails, messages, and discussions about timing for public appearances suggested that narrative management was a priority. Photographers were briefed in advance, events were choreographed to the minute, and statements were drafted to project an image of authenticity. These behind-the-scenes actions were subtle but significant, reinforcing Kelly's growing suspicion that the public story did not fully align with private reality. Rumors, by their nature, are a mix of fact, interpretation, and speculation. But when they are rooted in real observation, they gain weight. Kelly's insights transformed these whispers into something tangible. She didn't just repeat gossip. She recalled first-hand moments that contradicted the public story. She connected the dots between private behavior, strategic media planning, and public perception. And when she finally revealed her account, the world could no longer dismiss these once fringe observations. The emotional dimension of the rumors cannot be understated. Fans felt invested, protective even, of Meghan's image. To challenge the pregnancy narrative was to challenge the perception of authenticity that had been built over years. Social media became a battlefield between believers and skeptics, with arguments fueled by images, videos, and personal convictions. Kelly's position, however, was unique. She held knowledge that transcended conjecture. She had observed reality firsthand. Her confession also sheds light on a broader cultural phenomenon, the intersection of celebrity, social media, and public expectation. When millions of people focus their attention on a public figure, the pressure to perform authenticity becomes almost unbearable. Every movement is analyzed, every gesture interpreted, every smile dissected. In this environment, even the smallest anomaly can become magnified, and rumors, once dismissed, can gain credibility. Kelly's insights illustrate just how powerful and pervasive these dynamics can be. But the most astonishing aspect of the rumors, and what made Kelly's confession so compelling, was the alignment of subtle signs with larger inconsistencies. Photographs, interviews, public appearances, and private behavior formed a pattern that, when analyzed together, painted a picture very different from the one the world believed. It wasn't a single error or a single misstep. It was a constellation of moments, all pointing in one direction. The possibility that the pregnancy narrative had been carefully constructed, managed, and presented as truth. The tension between belief and doubt, public perception and private observation, is what makes this chapter so critical. Rumors alone could never have had the impact they did without Kelly's confirmation. Her confession bridged the gap between speculation and first-hand knowledge, giving the world a lens through which to reassess what had been accepted for so long. It transformed whispers into undeniable intrigue, speculation into drama, and suspicion into revelation. And just when the audience thought they understood the scope of the rumors, Kelly's next insight sent shockwaves through both fans and media observers alike. She revealed specific instances where the so-called evidence of pregnancy, the moments the public had celebrated and scrutinized, was, according to her, carefully managed, almost orchestrated, to create an illusion of authenticity. These moments weren't random. They were deliberate, meticulously timed, and strategically positioned. So the question becomes, if rumors had been circulating for years, and if subtle inconsistencies had been noted by the public, what made Kelly's confession so devastating? The answer is simple. She provided the missing piece, the first-hand account, the witness testimony that could connect the dots and validate suspicions in a way that no photograph or social media post ever could. But just as the public began to digest this revelation, another layer of intrigue emerged. Not only did Kelly suggest the pregnancy was fake, but she also hinted at motives, pressures, and strategic decisions that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. And as the world braced for answers, the suspense reached a fever pitch. Because what came next would reveal the private conversations, the behind-the-scenes orchestration, and the emotional complexities that made this story more than a rumor, and no one was prepared for the depth of what Kelly would disclose next. What really happens behind closed doors? What do we miss when the cameras stop rolling and the public gaze fades? That's where the story of Meghan Markle's pregnancies and Kelly McKee-Zajfan's shocking revelations becomes truly compelling. Because behind the polished smiles, the staged appearances, and the viral headlines, there was a private world that few ever glimpsed. And it's in that world that Kelly witnessed the moments that would later drive her confession. From the very beginning, Kelly had access to conversations, private dinners, and informal moments where Meghan's behavior was unguarded, or at least appeared to be. It's easy to underestimate the importance of these intimate interactions. While public appearances are carefully orchestrated, private moments can reveal underlying truths, tensions, and intentions. And according to Kelly, that's precisely where she noticed subtle inconsistencies that didn't align with the pregnancy narrative everyone had embraced. Imagine being in a room with someone everyone admires, someone whose every gesture is scrutinized by millions, yet seeing behavior that contradicts the public story. Kelly describes instances where Meghan appeared surprisingly energetic during supposed late-stage pregnancy events, moments when her schedule was far too demanding for someone genuinely expecting. There were playful interactions, long walks, and casual activities that didn't fit the narrative of a physically taxing condition. For someone in the public eye, appearances can be manipulated, but private behavior, how someone moves, rests, or reacts when no one else is looking, can reveal truths that no image or headline can hide. One of the most revealing aspects Kelly highlighted was how Meghan managed information even within her inner circle. While she was candid about certain struggles, she carefully framed narratives to maintain control over what others perceived. Kelly recalls moments when Meghan would hint at challenges, only to immediately reframe them in a positive, public-facing light. These weren't lies in the malicious sense, Kelly explains. They were strategic adjustments, methods of controlling perception. And over time, Kelly realized that the same careful curation applied to the pregnancy narrative itself. These private interactions were also emotionally charged. Kelly shares that she often felt a mix of admiration, confusion, and unease. Admiration, because Meghan was charismatic, articulate, and capable of commanding attention. Confusion, because small details didn't always align with what she saw publicly. Unease, because as a friend, she understood that the truth, if revealed, would be explosive. Loyalty and honesty clashed constantly. Kelly didn't want to betray Meghan's trust, but she also couldn't ignore what she had observed. It wasn't just behavior that raised questions. Conversations between Meghan and Kelly often included subtle admissions, indirect hints, and personal reflections that suggested a deeper awareness of narrative control. Meghan would talk about media perception, strategize timing for appearances, and discuss how to maintain composure under public scrutiny. These moments were casual, almost throwaway comments. Yet Kelly later realized they hinted at a capacity for manipulating narrative on a level that extended even to the pregnancies the public had celebrated. And then there were the inconsistencies in timing. Kelly observed private moments where the supposed timeline of pregnancy didn't align with what was portrayed publicly. There were interactions that implied the pregnancy was less advanced than media reports suggested. There were private dinners, social outings, and casual activities that conflicted with the physical realities of late-term pregnancy. These weren't blatant signs. They were subtle, easily dismissed by anyone not paying close attention, but they were enough for Kelly to start questioning the story she had been part of. The tension of these private revelations created a unique emotional landscape. Kelly describes feeling trapped between the desire to protect a friend and the growing awareness that something significant was being hidden from the world. Every interaction became a test. How much could she observe? How much could she trust her own perceptions? How much could she keep secret before it became a burden too heavy to bear? And as time went on, that burden only grew heavier. Another dimension of the private reality was Meghan's skill at controlling optics even among friends. Kelly recalls that casual conversations were often laced with cues meant to guide perception. Certain comments were designed to be overheard or relayed, photos were strategically positioned, and narratives were subtly reinforced even outside of the media's gaze. It was a level of awareness and planning that Kelly found impressive, yet troubling. How much of the friendship was authentic, and how much was part of a broader performance intended to shape narrative? And then there was the moment when Kelly realized the implications of all these observations. A private comment here, a misalignment there, and a small but undeniable pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just about public appearances or media management. It was about truth itself. The pregnancy narrative, carefully constructed and widely celebrated, might not reflect reality. Kelly began connecting the dots. Private behavior, strategic control of appearances, subtle inconsistencies, and selective disclosure. They all pointed toward one shocking possibility, that the pregnancies, or at least the way they had been publicly presented, had been staged. Kelly also recalls an emotional turning point. She describes a particular evening when Meghan, perhaps unaware of the full weight of her words, made comments that, in retrospect, seemed like indirect admissions. Observing her friend in that moment, Kelly felt a mix of loyalty, shock, and responsibility. She knew then that the truth she had observed could not remain hidden forever. It was one thing to notice inconsistencies. It was another to understand their significance and the impact they could have if revealed. The private world, as Kelly describes it, was one of contradictions. There was warmth and humor, charm and wit, generosity and compassion, but alongside these positive traits were calculated decisions, strategic behavior, and a remarkable awareness of perception. It was this tension, this duality, that made her eventual confession so powerful. She could speak with authority because she had seen both sides, the public spectacle and the private orchestration. And perhaps most compellingly, Kelly's account reveals how carefully Meghan managed her own image even in intimate settings. She describes moments when Meghan would adjust her behavior, reframe a conversation, or subtly redirect attention, all in ways that maintained the illusion of normalcy. These were small, almost imperceptible acts, but they compounded over time, reinforcing the story that the world accepted as truth. By the time Kelly decided to speak publicly, she had accumulated years of observations, anecdotes, and private insights that painted a cohesive picture. It wasn't merely about questioning a pregnancy. It was about revealing the contrast between private reality and public narrative, about highlighting the skillful management of perception, and about understanding the personal and emotional dynamics at play. Her confession was the culmination of careful reflection and ethical consideration, a decision made after years of wrestling with the tension between loyalty and truth. And just as the audience begins to process the gravity of what Kelly witnessed behind closed doors, another revelation emerges, one that bridges private observations with public events, connecting rumors, behaviors, and media appearances into a storyline that shocks, fascinates, and compels viewers to question everything. Because what came next would finally show how the private world Kelly observed intersected with public perception, and no one was ready for the magnitude of what she would disclose. She finally said the words everyone feared, the ones that would ripple across social media, tabloids, and royal commentary like a shockwave. Meghan Markle's pregnancy, the pregnancy the world had celebrated, debated, and analyzed for years, was not real. Kelly McKee-Zajfin, her closest confidant, had confirmed what whispers and rumors had hinted at but never proven. For millions of fans, the claim was inconceivable. For skeptics, it was validation. And for the media, it was the story of the decade. Imagine hearing that from someone who had been inside Meghan's inner circle. Not a distant journalist, not a speculative blogger, but someone who dined with her, shared private conversations, and witnessed behind-the-scenes decisions firsthand. That weight of authenticity is what made Kelly's confession impossible to ignore. She didn't just say it. She provided context, evidence, and anecdotes that supported her claim, weaving a narrative so compelling that disbelief and curiosity collided in every listener's mind. Kelly recounted moments that, at first glance, seemed ordinary, but in hindsight, painted a different picture. She described days when Meghan's schedule would be grueling for anyone, let alone someone allegedly in the final stages of pregnancy. Long walks, energetic meetings, social outings, and public events, all meticulously timed, appeared to contradict the physical realities of pregnancy. At the time, friends and staff might have shrugged these off as sheer resilience, but Kelly, observing closely, began to piece together an unsettling truth. Then there were the strategic appearances. Kelly explained how certain outfits, hand placements, and camera angles were carefully orchestrated to create the illusion of pregnancy. Dresses were designed to suggest a bump that may not have been there. Poses were calculated to reinforce the narrative, and public appearances were timed to give the world a sense of progression. Small details, invisible to most, added up in a pattern that could not be coincidental. And it wasn't only visual cues that raised suspicion. Behavior, tone, and conversation played a significant role. Kelly noted moments when Meghan's responses to questions about the pregnancy were unusually measured, almost rehearsed. Public interactions with reporters, charity guests, and royal family members were polished to the point of seeming unnatural, calculated for maximum media effect. To a casual observer, this might read as poise or professionalism. To someone within her private circle, it suggested conscious management of perception. But why would Meghan go to such lengths? Kelly offered insight into her friend's motivations, painting a picture of a woman navigating unprecedented scrutiny, pressure, and expectation. The Duchess was not just a public figure. She was a symbol, a brand, and a subject of constant global fascination. In that context, the fabrication, or management, of a pregnancy could be interpreted as a strategy, a way to maintain control over narrative and public attention, while safeguarding personal circumstances from the relentless media gaze. Social media, of course, amplified the consequences of this revelation. When Kelly's claims surfaced, fans exploded into debate. Some were horrified, feeling personally betrayed, their belief in Meghan's authenticity shaken. Others seized upon the confession as proof of what they had long suspected. Viral threads dissected every detail of the pregnancies, comparing images, revisiting interviews, and speculating on inconsistencies that had once been dismissed. Kelly's account had given the whispers weight, turning speculation into an urgent, compelling narrative. Public perception shifted in an instant. Headlines screamed across websites. Confidant confirms Meghan's pregnancy was staged or royal shock. Insider reveals pregnancy may have been fake. But the emotional impact went beyond media cycles. Fans felt a profound sense of disorientation. How could the life event they had celebrated, theorized about, and emotionally invested in be questioned in such a definitive way? Kelly's confession didn't just challenge facts. It challenged feelings, assumptions, and trust. Yet, Kelly's revelation was nuanced. She wasn't presenting Meghan as cruel or intentionally deceptive. She framed it as a complex mix of public image management, personal pressure, and the unique demands placed on someone in Meghan's position. This wasn't about malice. It was about navigating an environment where perception is everything, and control over narrative can mean the difference between admiration and scrutiny. Kelly emphasized that understanding context was key to interpreting the confession. The confession also revealed a timeline that contradicted what the public had seen. Kelly described specific events, public appearances, and interactions where the so-called pregnancy milestones didn't align with reality. She recalled photo shoots, interviews, and charitable events where Meghan's behavior, energy, and engagement suggested a discrepancy between public portrayal and private truth. These examples were crucial. They provided the proof points that made her claim more than speculation. In addition, Kelly described private reactions from staff and friends who had noticed inconsistencies but were unsure how to interpret them. Some speculated quietly, others dismissed anomalies as coincidence. Kelly herself had remained hesitant for years, torn between loyalty and the growing realization that the truth could not remain hidden. Her eventual decision to speak was not impulsive. It was the culmination of observation, reflection, and the understanding that public awareness was inevitable once the details were scrutinized closely. And then there were the emotional stakes. Kelly's confession highlighted not only discrepancies in timing and appearance, but also the human element, the strain, stress, and emotional complexity of managing a life under public scrutiny. Meghan's skill in maintaining composure, even when navigating personal challenges, added another layer of fascination and tension. It raised questions about how personal reality and public performance intertwine, especially for someone in Meghan's position. Audience reaction, naturally, was explosive. Social media erupted. Fans debated endlessly. Skeptics felt vindicated. Critics pounced. Every photograph, every video clip, every media appearance was re-examined with new scrutiny. Kelly's confession didn't just reveal a secret. It forced the world to revisit every previous assumption, every widely circulated image, and every celebrated milestone. Suddenly, nothing could be taken at face value. But the most shocking element of Kelly's claim wasn't the suggestion that the pregnancy was staged. It was her insight into the meticulous planning, timing, and strategy behind it. According to her, nothing was left to chance. Public appearances, media statements, and even casual gestures were orchestrated to ensure that the world received a consistent, believable story. The revelation reframed every image, every article, and every public engagement in a completely new light. Kelly also described moments where Meghan appeared conflicted or even anxious about maintaining the facade. These private flashes of emotion underscored the immense pressure she was under and humanized a situation that, from the outside, might seem calculated or manipulative. It wasn't merely a performance. It was a complex interplay of personal ambition, societal expectation, and the relentless gaze of a global audience. As the confession circulated, public curiosity reached a fever pitch. Fans demanded more details. Media outlets dug for verification. Royal commentators scrambled to interpret the implications. And amidst all this attention, Kelly remained resolute. Her intention was not to attack Meghan, but to reveal the reality she had observed, the inconsistencies she had documented, and the truth behind what millions had believed for years. But just when the audience thought they had grasped the enormity of the revelation, another layer emerged. Kelly hinted that the story didn't stop at the pregnancy itself. There were additional private insights, nuanced behaviors, and behind-the-scenes orchestrations that, when revealed, would elevate the scandal to an entirely new level. Details that would leave even the most devoted fans questioning not just the events, but the intentions, motives, and decisions behind them. Because what came next would expose the hidden mechanisms, the unseen patterns, and the emotional complexities that made the confession far more than a single shocking claim. And no one could have anticipated the full scale of what Kelly was about to reveal. Have you ever wondered how we can be so easily convinced by appearances? How a carefully orchestrated narrative can make the impossible seem plausible? That is precisely the question Kelly McKee Zachman forces us to confront. Because while the world celebrated Meghan Markle's pregnancies as milestones of joy, there were signs. Small, subtle, almost imperceptible, that something was amiss. And Kelly had noticed them all. The evidence, as she recounts it, isn't based on hearsay or gossip. It's based on observation, timing, and behavior. Things the public rarely sees, things that go unnoticed amid the glare of cameras and flashing lights. From the outside, Meghan's pregnancy seemed flawless. Carefully chosen outfits, staged appearances, and polished interviews. But when you look closer, when you know where to look, the inconsistencies begin to emerge. Kelly points to the first category of evidence: timing. Every pregnancy milestone was broadcast with precision. Every public appearance was scheduled to coincide with a narrative that reinforced the story of progress, of authenticity, of a growing baby bump. But in private, Kelly noticed a different rhythm. Meghan's energy levels, her movement, her day-to-day activities sometimes contradicted what the public was led to believe. Walks that seemed too long for someone supposedly heavily pregnant, dinners that required no visible accommodations, casual social outings that didn't align with expectations. These were the subtle flags that first triggered Kelly's doubts. And it wasn't just the activities, it was the way they were presented. Photographers captured images from angles that exaggerated the illusion. Hand placements were deliberate, outfits were carefully tailored, and poses were curated to suggest the presence of a bump. What most fans interpreted as natural or charming gestures were, according to Kelly, calculated to reinforce a narrative. And when these orchestrated appearances were juxtaposed with private behavior, the discrepancies became even more apparent. Kelly also recalls moments when Meghan's gestures and expressions didn't match the supposed physical reality of pregnancy. Subtle cues, like the way she shifted her weight, the ease with which she moved, or the timing of gestures during interviews, contradicted what one might expect of a woman in late-stage pregnancy. These were minute details, easy to dismiss, but when observed consistently, they painted a troubling picture. Another striking piece of evidence came from wardrobe choices. Kelly observed that Meghan's outfits were carefully designed to create the illusion of a growing bump. Certain silhouettes, patterns, and fabrics amplified curves or subtly concealed them. It was fashion as theater, performance as disguise. To the casual observer, the effect was seamless. But to Kelly, familiar with the intimate reality of daily life and personal routines, the design choices hinted at a constructed narrative. Then there were the interviews. Meghan's public statements were polished, measured, and often perfectly timed. But Kelly noticed a pattern in which questions were anticipated and answers carefully rehearsed. There were subtle pauses, overly precise wording, and gestures that seemed to belong more to performance than candid expression. The result was convincing, but it was not necessarily truthful. Each interview became a piece of the puzzle, and when combined with wardrobe and behavior, the picture began to diverge from what the public assumed. Even social events revealed inconsistencies. Kelly recalled occasions where Meghan participated in engagements that, according to the supposed stage of pregnancy, should have been physically taxing. She attended receptions, charitable functions, and public walks with an energy that seemed incongruent with her public timeline. These events, while minor in isolation, became significant when viewed alongside the cumulative evidence. The orchestration of appearances, the timing of announcements, and the calculated presentation of self. Photographs offer another layer of subtle clues. Angles, lighting, and staging often exaggerated or diminished certain features to create the perception of pregnancy progression. Kelly observed that the choice of location, camera angle, and timing of exposure was not random. It was carefully managed. Fans analyzing photos would celebrate changes over weeks and months, unaware that much of what they were seeing had been curated for effect. Kelly also highlights inconsistencies in public behavior versus private communication. There were moments when private messages or casual conversations revealed a reality different from the story presented publicly. Meghan's reflections on media management, comments about controlling appearances, and strategic planning discussions hinted at a consciousness of narrative that few outsiders could comprehend. The public, seeing only polished appearances, remained unaware of the deliberate orchestration behind every detail. Even minor incidents provided hints. Small adjustments to posture, subtle interactions with staff, or slight deviations in schedule all contributed to the overall narrative. Individually, they seemed insignificant. Collectively, they formed a pattern that Kelly identified and documented in her mind over months and years. This evidence, subtle yet consistent, became the backbone of her eventual confession. The culmination of this evidence was most compelling when viewed alongside private insights. Kelly recounts times when Meghan's statements, jokes, or offhand comments hinted at awareness of how the public was being guided. For instance, playful remarks about timing, teasing observations about press reactions, or self-aware comments about appearances in media all suggested that the narrative of pregnancy had been intentionally shaped. These moments were rarely noted by anyone else, but formed a critical part of Kelly's understanding. What made Kelly's account so credible was not just observation, but context. She didn't rely on speculation or third-party accounts. She connected the timing of appearances, public interviews, wardrobe choices, behavior, and private commentary into a cohesive framework. Each piece